Well, our top story this morning, Jeremy Hunt has hinted that any tax cuts in the budget will be made responsibly as new polling sees Conservative support at its lowest level in more than 40 years.
Now, the Chancellor is reportedly considering further cuts to public spending to allow for more tax giveaways, with Labour accusing the government of playing politics. Joining us in the studio are our political correspondent, Alicia Fitzgerald, so much better than Peter Carball, and former Home Office advisor, Claire Pearsall. Good morning, gang.
God, you're on one today.
You'll be really happy
He really is.
My voice is
He's had
going.
his paracetamol and he's
can
off
tell.
on one.
My voice is going, which is great news for a lot of people. She's hoping it gives up in about an hour. Polls are synonymous with inaccuracies and parties will say, oh, it's this, it's that. For 2 years, the Tory party has lagged almost 20 points behind Labour. This latest one, if it's right, says that they will return 25 seats. This is potentially the biggest electoral wipeout in their history, isn't it?
Yes, and this specific poll that we're talking about shows the lowest ever recorded polling since Ipsos actually started doing this in the first place. So that's actually crazy. I mean, out of the two main parties. So this is really, really quite significant for the Conservatives. I mean, the last time they saw polling almost that low was just before Tony Blair came into government in 1997 when he had that massive wipeout. So really quite significant. Obviously, polls don't always directly mirror what will happen at the general election. They're more of a bellwether just to see where the public opinion is shifting. But nonetheless, this really, really shows that we're moving away from the Conservative Party at the moment.
And Claire, do you think that there can be one thing to blame for this appalling polling, or is it just a mixture of the last 14 years?
I think it's a mixture of everything. I think people are incredibly angry. There has been nothing to give people hope. Quite interestingly, there was a poll of under 35s who are moving away from the Conservative Party in droves. It's now down into single figures. So young people aren't coming forward to support the Conservative Party. Older voters are now moving away.
Presumably all they've known, under 35, is the Tory government. And they're like so many people saying, is it time for that change? You can say, Alicia, that, and I said at the beginning, you know, polls don't always pan out. But this has been going on and on. Just to bring you to the budget, I mean, overnight, another leak. He's apparently going to help motorists by freezing fuel duty, which Howard Cox and the Fairview lot have been going on about for months. Again, with 24 hours to go, to me, it doesn't sound genuine. To me, Claire, in the old days, the budget would happen and you deal with it. Now we're going to do this, we're not going to do that. We're responsible tax cuts. Are they in the last chance saloon? Seriously, it sounds like it to me.
It feels like it.
Yeah,
there isn't much headroom anyway. And if Jeremy Hunt wants to be a fiscally responsible Conservative Chancellor, which is what he sets his stall out to be, then you can't just go cutting tax because it's popular. There isn't the money to go around. It looks a little bit like he probably will end up doing 1 pence off income tax, 1 pence off national insurance. That isn't enough to save the Conservative Party, I don't think. It isn't going to make an enormous difference in people's pocket. And if people are struggling, they want something that is going to be fundamentally different at the end of every month. And this just isn't going to cut it.
Alicia, do you think that the budget actually cuts through to members of the public? Do you think voters actually care or even understand? I'm not saying that the electorate are not clever enough to understand it, but it just feels like these bizarre figures and numbers. What does it actually mean for people in their pocket at the end of the day?
Absolutely, and I think we hear the phrase tax cuts in kind of capital letters all the time, and I think when people hear that, you assume that that means you're going to be X amount of pounds richer at the end of each month, when in reality, if we're cutting just a penny of income tax, it's not going to make a huge difference to people's wealth. It's not going to be the deciding factor between someone having no money at the end of the month to someone being really comfortable and financially stable. That is not what this is. And I think that the worry with this budget specifically is because it's probably the last time the Conservatives have a chance to do something major before the election that they feel can try and just keep a few of their voters still on side. And the worry is that they'll make a really big announcement, which sounds really good, but A, probably isn't sustainable in the long run. B, potentially whoever does take over government, whether it's Labour or whoever, whatever happens in the general election, means that will have to be reversed or changed. Or C, just actually doesn't really make a huge impact in the first place whatsoever. And I think those are the key three things.
Same to Peter Yeston. I'd take Nick's point, absolutely. I think the British public have wised up. I think over a period of time, about politicians, they're wiser. I think they look at some of the things that we've all witnessed and they go, oh, I'm judging you a bit. Tax cuts is a classic. I think 10 years ago, right? If you'd said that, people would have gone, oh, I'm going to vote. I think people know, because of the pandemic, because of, furlough, great, the greatest giveaway chancellor in the land, we're always going to have to pay it back. I think people are going, hold on a second, the Tories are going to do this to get my vote and I'm going to have to pay it back next year. That is the trouble they're in. But you know what, Claire? It's of their own making. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the pandemic and everything else. There's been a lot of mismanagement. And that man there on screen, Rishi Sunak, he wanted this job and he said it would be different. It hasn't been different at all. They are in a worse state in terms of that poll than they were when Liz Truss was in power. That's a disgrace.
Yes. And it is. And it's quite a damning indictment that the Prime Minister who lasted for 45 days and trashed the economy is thought of better than the current Prime Minister. But going back to the budget, and I think Nicola's exactly right, is the public aren't stupid.
No.
They know that any tax cut is going to come with a rise somewhere else because you have to be able to pay for it. So they know they're going to be given in one hand, taken away with the other.
And this comment about we're going to cut some money off public services. Our public services are in the toilet. How can you cut any more off that?
I don't know. I don't see where you can cut. There is no fat on the bone at the moment.
No.
People are struggling. Libraries are closing, and they mean a huge amount of people. Bus services in the toilet, especially if you live in rural areas.
How did we get to this point, though? Seriously. Because it isn't great, is it?
14 years, yeah. It's a long, slow death, hasn't it, really? It has felt like that. And I'm 35, I'm at the cusp of that, demographic.
I don't think
so
anybody under 35 should be allowed to vote anyway. Far too young to
You would say that. What do you think the Tories are going to run this election on then? It's clearly not going to be anything budget related.
Well, you think, but I feel like in a way they know that the cost of living in the economy is something that is impacting pretty much, definitely everyone in the UK, and they know that this is probably the thing that voters want to change the most. People want to be better off, and I think that is just the key thing. So I think the trouble is that Labour for a while have just been riding off the back of consecutive failures within the Conservative Party, and people want to see Labour be a bit more hardline with their approach to certain things and have more concrete plans. And the Conservatives, people just feel like they need to know that something will change because we've had so much words, so many kind of big speeches and big promises, and people just say, where is the difference? Where's the change? That's the key thing.
And he said he was going to be the Prime Minister of change,
he did.
didn't he? Do you think that he's stuck to his word there, Claire?
I think the difficulty is because it has gone so far, there is very little left to be able to
Victim
change.
of circumstance or out of his depth?
I think probably 50-50 on that one.
Really honest
I
answer.
think his judgment, his political judgment isn't there, and it's quite stunning that he surrounds himself by people who also have very little political judgment.
He's only been an MP for 9 years. Did you know that? 8.5 years.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting answer because a lot of people will say, and we've heard it, haven't we? The pandemic, the war in Ukraine. Yeah. I don't see any... Well, I said it yesterday, when he walked into 10 Downing Street, very serious, got out the car, walked up and said, I'm going to do this differently after the debacle and employed Gavin Williamson. And you might laugh, I instantly thought, there's no difference. And actually, for a man who desperately wanted that job, maybe he is a victim to a degree, but I don't see that politician that I think has a vision, has passion. I mean, I disagreed with Blair a lot, but my God, he took the country with him because you believed him. Same with Thatcher. I don't feel it with him. You felt that with Boris Johnson. We can criticise Boris Johnson. You don't feel that with Sunak in my mind.
Do you feel it with Starmer?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I want conviction politicians. I'd buy Angela Rayner over Keir Starmer any day, because our Ange says it as it is. Look at those two on screen, Starmer and Reeves. They don't excite you, but then what's going to happen is people are going to go, quite rightly, we're screwed. We haven't got that much money. Maybe who'd have thought, right? You're 35, that we would be sitting here and saying, we want sense and we want calm. We're going to vote, essentially, a lot of people, the polls saying, for the Labour Party. I mean, that is some comeback from Jeremy Corbyn 4 years ago, right? Isn't it?
Huge. It's huge. And when you look at them, it's like the provincial bank manager standing there has suddenly become much more interesting than the Conservative Party, who have always been about the economy.
I think it's unbelievable. The turnaround is unbelievable.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks to Alicia and Claire for joining us this morning.